Okay, we are continuing with the second part of the basic collar. So to finish up the upper collar, we want to label it so with your initials or your name and the size. So this is size 8 that we took from our size 8 sloper measurements. Have our grain lines, cutting instructions. So this is cut 1 or self 1, our size, fold bracket here, and then we've put the instructions to place on the fold. So there are two ways to transfer your pattern. One is to use your cork board. I'm going to go ahead and cut a piece of paper to draft the under collar. And you need it to be about approximately the same size as the piece for the upper collar. Remember that we do need to put a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance on this to leave enough space. So if you put a guideline down on your piece of paper for the under collar, you can either put this on top of, hopefully you can see through my paper here with the camera, if you zoom in, and I can use my rulers to go in and trace just the outside shape of the collar. So we draft the under collar using the shape of the upper collar. Or you can use your cork board and transfer like we learned to do in class. So again, I'm going to line up these grain lines here. So that center back line is a guideline. Put my push pins in. And just so you're clear on which lines we're tracing line E. Line C is a guideline here in this corner. So that would be the bottom portion of our collar. So I'm going to starting at the center back, this was B, A, I think this was F, and E. Going in with my tracing wheel to trace my curve. This is actually a straight line, so I'm going to go over this with a straight line. Straight line here, straight line here. So we're going in with our ruler. And I'm drawing from point to point. I'm going to lightly draw guideline C, or you can draw just up to D, and then I'm going to go back in. Again, I used the hip curve. To true this curve here. Okay, so this is our under collar. The next step in the book tells you to finish up the under collar. On this bottom edge here. So if this were flipped the other way, this would be the bottom edge of your collar. You're going to trim 1/8 of an inch and it will blend into this line, A to F. So remember, 1/8 of an inch on your ruler. Clear ruler is 1 block. Now it's going to come off the center back. So I'm going to mark here. And I'm going to just, in this corner, match this up so that I'm blending into point F. Okay, and so this will be trimmed. So I'm actually going to erase this line because we're going to use this for our seam allowance. I can go ahead and transfer my grain lines because I can see through my original pattern. So there's my straight grain, cross grain, and bias. Also going to put on a fold bracket. With arrows pointing to my center back edge. So this is my center back here. And I'm going to write place on fold. Or just fold. And I'm going to label. So this is my under collar. My name or initials. And this is cut 1 or self 1 of my main fabric over my size, which is 8. And the under collar would also get interfacing. So this would be cut 1 of my main fabric or myself, and then cut 1 interfacing. Okay, so now I'm actually going to erase this line so we don't have to transfer it to another piece of paper. So that's that original line. So this is essentially us trimming off 1/8 of an inch at the top to blend into the collar point. And I will proceed to put my seam allowance on. So let's just go to the flat tape. Seam allowance needs to go on both the under and upper collar. Please make sure that you are not putting seam allowance on the fold edge here. And I would suggest starting with your straight edges. So 1/4 of an inch. Remember to extend out past the pattern edge so that your seam allowance will connect itself and you'll get the proper corner. And remember here that C is a guideline. So I will have a curved edge here. So I'm going to pivot where my line starts to change here to put seam allowance on this curve. And again, I'm going to extend past my edge so that this will close itself. And this will kind of clean itself up once I cut on my seam allowance line. I do want to make sure that you are marking the shoulder notch. So that was point D. And you're going to make a notch here, which looks like a small T. Notch points, I can go ahead and cut this out carefully, making sure I cut right on the line. And I'm going to also put seam allowance on the under collar. Now in the book it does show you how to cut this on the fold so that you have one complete collar piece. The only difference from the book is that we are placing this on the fold, just using less paper. Okay, so once we have the seam allowance on, then we're ready to cut out. Okay.